welcome everybody. First item of business. I've got, I think, 7 slides. The rest of it is demo. And it's a bit of risk, guys, so if I crash and burn, I crash and burn, but it's been working fine. But the reason I'm telling you that, other than to lower your expectations so I can try and exceed them, is that if you want to see the screen sometimes, you'd be better off in front than in back, because I can't magnify it a lot other than because of the projector and whatever else. So if you want to see what I'm doing, you might be more advantageous to be sitting up front. But please feel free to sit wherever you want to, okay? So I'm Scott Medberry, Director of Product Management at Model N. In the past, if you've attended other RAINMAKERs, the session has been, that I've dealt with, has always been, what's the latest and greatest? And I spend 45 minutes and I go boom, 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 boom through all the products, and here's the features, and here's the features, and here's the feature, and done, okay? That isn't today. We're doing something different. I think everybody felt that was getting a little stale, a little old, so we're going to try something different. We're going to do more of, it's not a hands-on, but more of a, here's one product, here's how we're handling regulatory change, for example. So just a little bit of a different spin. If you've seen presentations before, this is going to be just a little bit different. I also want to introduce my counterpart in crime from MNI, our Indian affiliate, Manish Balin, sitting there by the projector. Raise your hand, Manish, who is my counterpart. He's the one dealing directly with the engineers from the product management team. Okay? So with those little bits, let's get started. Okay, agenda. I want to talk a little bit about resilience to change, because we all know change is there, change occurs, and we all would like to be a little more resilient to it, to handle it, to make sure that it doesn't catch us in a place where we can't respond. I'm going to spend the most of the time talking about a hypothetical example, though. This isn't modeled on anything in particular that I know is coming out. Don't take this as real. This is hypothetical. It's a bit situational. Going through, situation normal, a change occurs, analyze it a little bit, respond to it. We're going to do all that in the application, okay? And then just one slide on the summary. So relatively short, relatively sweet. We should have time for questions along the way if you want to ask. So, okay, we all know Medicaid is static yet changing. The program's been around since 1991. A lot of changes very early in the program in the early 1990s. A long period where not much really changed on it. And then more recently, we're seeing a lot of things occurring between the DRA and healthcare reform. Changing minimum rates, the wonderful idea about new formulations. We used to start with just fee-for-service utilization, but then they added, well, let's do J-codes too, get the doctor-administered drugs, and now more recently, the managed care-based utilization is starting to come in for Medicaid. More states, more program types, et cetera. They're finally coming into the 21st century a little bit. They're thinking about doing things electronically. It's a bit scary for them, but they've indicated that they have an idea that there's some electronic forms that they'd like to pass back and forth in ROSIs and PQUASs and stuff like that. So there is some change. So, and of course, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have somebody to discuss about these things, and Model N being able to provide solutions to assist in some of that change management. So, an example. And this is, as I said, totally hypothetical. And the key in this is, an analyst in the office says, hey boss, the Florida supplemental invoice came in for Q4. Looks about the same as before, the invoice amount looks like it's been before. I'll import the file into Model N, and tomorrow I'll start processing. Good, just another day in the office, right? Nothing new, nothing different. Of course, you come into the office the next morning, and on your computer is a little email from the Florida Secretary of AHCA, your good counterpart over there, saying, dear manufacturer, and you always love the emails that start out like that. This is to inform you that pursuant to probably your master contract or something like that, we'll be implementing a 5% industrial funding fee. This is hypothetical, remember, but it isn't totally outside the bounds of possibility. Authorized in our master contract, blah, blah, blah. Oh, effective for the quarter you're processing right now. Thank you very much. And the letter goes on and on. It talks about a lot of other things. And down near the bottom it says, oh, by the way, we've switched many of our covered lives to a new claims processor, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't see any impact on that. It'll be just seamless for you, because we're going to do the same line edits and stuff like that. It'll be cool. It'll be fine. Good. Okay, that's the setup. So let's go into the application, see what we can do about this wonderful situation. So I've already kind of cut to the chase. I've logged in. I've gone to the Medicaid program. I've selected the state of Florida, and I've only got the supplemental shown here. And if I scroll over to the side, and this is the most recent 8 quarters of claims, and you can see that, yeah, the rebate invoice amount looks pretty consistent. It varies a little bit from quarter to quarter, but it isn't all that unusual. So your analyst was right about that. But if you look a little farther, you say, oh, the approved rate is down. And while you haven't been having to dispute much before, the claims have been pretty clean coming from the state, Model N is saying, hey, you should be disputing $13,000 on there. Well, I know that they changed the formula. Remember that letter said, hey, we've got a formula change here. Maybe these disputes are about the formula, and if we just correct the formula, we'll be good to go. So let's go into the claim. And go to the claim lines. And you can see, yeah, the formulas, they're saying that the calculated amount is $25, or the system is calculating a $25 URA, and they're asking for a $26 URA, okay? And if you drill into the URA, you just to refresh your memory on what the formula is, it's really a GNUP. It's AMP minus a GNUP price list that you've configured in there minus Medicaid full. So it's not that strange, pretty vanilla, but you don't see the 0.5% there for the industrial funding fee. So no, that hasn't been updated on here. So we're going to have to go and do that to see if changing this will get rid of the dispute and make everything look happy, and you can go on your merry way. You're, of course, suspicious that that's maybe not going to be the case because maybe you've got some background knowledge about your product and you know that the Lurigator product is, it's a pill or something like that, and you don't have that many problems with claims coming in and getting misunited on there. But the Mendel product is a different story. You've had problems in the past with various states when they send in their claims because it's an injectable, and when they go through the J codes and do the conversions, you've had problems before. So you're suspicious that the other part of the letter I showed you before is causing you grief as well. But let's fix one problem at a time here, or validate one problem at a time. So let's go into Medicaid URA formulas. And I know some people were asking me about how applicable is this going to be for your system. So everything I showed you so far, every system Model N does this. Going into URA formulas is something new in 5.6, so sort of give you guys bounds on what's in each of the releases just so that you're aware. So I've already created a draft on this. Normally you'd come in here and you just see the active one, but in the interest of time, I've created a draft, which is a draft exactly like the active one. I haven't changed it at all yet. We'll just open up the draft. And for those of you who haven't seen 5.6 before, there's a whole section in here on formulas, price lists. And so if you remember that formula I showed you before, I've created a GNUP price list here. And so that's where this is, right, where I could create that GNUP price list, just to give you an idea that you can set up these different price lists for different states. So you don't have to go into the programs and change the program effective dates all the time, okay? But let's go into the formulas, because that's where the real business of today is, because we have to either create a new formula or change an existing formula to match what the state is requesting. And we happen to remember that the formula we're dealing with here is the GNUP formula right here. Very cleverly named, yeah, I know. If you look at it, yeah, it matches up. Yeah, this is the formula we were looking at. It's max. It's protecting so you don't have a zero or a negative rebate, right? And it's 0, and then the AMP, and then the GNUP price list, and Medicaid full. Good. This is the one. Now, there's a couple different approaches you could take. One approach would be to do something like this. We go in here and just say plus if, and then you go down here and say, okay, the calculation quarter end date, which is the period in which you're actually calculating that URA for that particular program. So because we want to make a change, right? Because starting Q4, the calculation changes. Q3 and before, it's one way. Q4 and after, it's later. So one way of handling this is to put in that calculation quarter end date. And you happen to remember that the way to do that is to set it up, is less than 2001, 2, so year, month, 12, day, 31. So if it's less than that last day of that quarter, which would mean that anything before that, we're not going to add anything, right? And if it's after that, whoops here, 0. And if it's after that period of time, because really this if statement is, if this condition holds true, do this, otherwise do this, right? That's really what we're trying to say here. So the other way of saying it then is, okay, 0, now we put in the math for what we're going to do it. And presumably you've got the master contract in front of you, and you know that really when they're saying that 0.5%, you're taking amp and multiplying it by 0.005, which will give you that 0.5% based on amp. Now, there could be some other basis you're doing on it, but in this example, this is what your contract language has. So that's one way you could handle this. But maybe based on your policy, because these formulas do get really long, if you start having if-then conditionals, every few quarters have an if-then conditional, it gets to be hard to read and hard to understand. Maybe your policy is you don't want to do it this way in your setup. So in that case, we're going to set up a new formula for the new period and apply that to the programs. Either one is equally valid. I'm just going through a couple different ways of handling it. Okay, so let's get rid of what I just did, because we're not going to use that. But I am going to copy the formula here, because I'm going to use it again in a couple seconds. Okay, so let's just close out of here without having changed anything. And what we're going to do is create a new formula. And because we're so clever, we're going to just name it gene up 2. Whoops, here, if I can put a 2 in there. And that's going to do the back end work to create that part for the formula here. And in a second, I'll be able to paste into there that formula that I just saved there and be able to edit to it. So it created it. So let's go down here to gene up 2. Make sure I get to the right one. And there it is. And it's a blank slate for you. You can put in whatever formula you want. Of course, I'm cheating. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to copy this formula. But because I'm going to use this formula only for the go-forward periods, I'm going to handle that in the Medicaid program. I don't have to have that if-then conditional. I'm just going to put in here now the plus. Am I getting an echo? A little bit. Okay. But you're understandable. Yeah, I'm. Plus, and then it's the amp again. So we'll just do this. Amp times the 0.005. Okay? Clear? So it's a lot more legible formula. That may be your policy on why you want to do it this particular way. If you're concerned about the order of precedence in here on your mathematics, you can put a parenthesis around here. It really isn't necessary because you do multiplications before additions. But if you're worried about it, you can put the parentheses in there as well. Okay? Close out of that. Let's just go back in there for a second and see, yep, it's been saved, okay? So let's confirm the save, make it read-only. This is just a general processing anytime you're going to go through this. We're going to do a validate step, because you may have changed several different things in here. In this case, we're not. We're only changing one formula. But we're going to do a validate against all of this to make sure that all the formulas make sense. We haven't deleted something. There's a dependency on another program. We haven't typed in some garbage into one of the formulas that it can't understand. Okay, so it says, yep, there's no problem with that, because it now lights up the submit for approval button. And we're going to, of course, run this through here. Part of the idea is that, of course, we've got the approval process here. I've, of course, subverted it. Your SOX people would die if they saw that the person submitting this was the actual person approving this. But because I don't have to worry about Model N SOX on this, we're just going to go right all the way through. Okay, we're approved. Activate it. Good. Once we've activated this, and it's going to ask me here for a reason why I'm doing this. So as your SOX people or someone else might want to know why you made this change. So once this is approved and it's activated now, it's going to be available in the Medicaid programs. When I go in there, I can use this new formula. If I'd have changed the existing formula, I wouldn't have to go into Medicaid programs. The next time I did the nightly URA calculation, it would pick up that change and it would calculate and say, hey, I've got a new value in the draft URAs. You'd publish that. But with this, we're just going to activate it. It's not going to change anything right now because we haven't used it anywhere in any of the Medicaid programs. Got to think about it for a second and do all the work it needs to do on this. Questions while this is going through? Does everybody follow what we're trying to do here, the methodology, what we're getting accomplished? Okay. So obviously the next step then is to go to Medicaid, go to the programs. Let's see if I can navigate. And I was smart enough to make this alphabetical so that the ANUP program, which is the one Florida's on, is near the top. And it's a relatively simple program. I'm going to amend it here right now because we're going to make some changes to it. Some such thing. Okay, so let's go into the products. And you see it's a simple program. You saw the claim. There's 4 products on there. All the products that are eligible are on that claim. And you can see right now we've got the GeneUp formula on here, which is the old one, right? And we've got, you know, the whole program started in 2011 Q1, and its effective date to the end of time. So the first thing let's do is change the effective date on these lines so that it's appropriate. And so I was in URA formulas, which is 5.6 new. Now I'm back into stuff that everybody should be relatively familiar with. This is in 5.2, 5.3, et cetera. So we just want to change the end effective quarter, and we want to make that 2012 Q3. Do that. I'll try to move through this relatively quickly because I think everybody's pretty familiar with this. Add the products, and I know with the labeler code. So let's just pick all the products in that labeler code. Okay, so I've added the products. I just need to now give them the right start date and formula. So let's do the formula first because that's the part that's different. So right here we've got a chooser that you can choose the formula. Of course, I know the name because I just worked on it. And we've got the old one and the new one. We want to use the new formula, the GeneUp 2, and you can see what it is. You can see it's the 0.5%. That's the one you want. Okay, we got it there. Good. Now we've done the formula part, and you can see that the old one is GeneUp and the new lines are GeneUp 2. So let's go and change the effective date here, and then we'll be done. Ready to get out of this. So I'm going to change the start effective quarter to 2012. Okay, one last pass through this. Looks like we've got all the parts we need. Okay, so obviously you'd have other people looking at this as well before you run it through, either that through the submission process. Actually, here, let's cancel this. Let's make sure we got a save in this first. Validate. We'll run through the whole line, and it's giving you a warning already, saying, hey, we got an implemented program here. And there's a claim that's outstanding, the one we've been working on. This is going to affect that. Okay. So let's submit that, say, yeah, we know. The warning was found. It's the same warning about that same issue. Okay, and again, Model N doesn't care. Their SOX department hasn't been on my case, so I can just run right through and approve that all by myself. And we'll just implement that. Yes, I do want to proceed. Okay, so done all the back-end work for the change in the URA. That letter, we've accomplished all the parts we need to do for that, with one exception. We need to go now on the pricing, because after we've made this change in the program, Model N's going to know, oh, the old URAs probably aren't necessary, or they don't know if they're necessarily accurate or not, so we're going to go back and recalculate the URAs for this program to see if they've changed. Let's go to the URAs, and we know that this was the ANUP program. And we'll see, and I should have probably showed you this before, there's revision 2, which is the published version that we were using for the claim. Now we've gone to revision 3. You can see definitely that they're not published. You can see that their creation date is here as of, well, this is a Pacific Standard Time Zone server, so we're an hour off from it, but it occurred a couple minutes ago. So Okay, so the one we're really interested in is the Q4 2012 URA, so let's look at that one. And we look at the prices, and you might not remember, but this was the price on the URA claim that the state had submitted, so that makes you feel better. And if you look at the formula, you validate, yeah, there's the 0.5% in there, and if you really want to go into the math, it'll show you the full AMP calculation, the full Medicaid calculation, or not the AMP calculation, the full Medicaid calculation, every bit that went into this, and you can validate on your own. I don't think either of us wants to spend the time on that today, but you could if you wanted to. Okay, it looks good. You've done your validation. You say, yep, let's publish this to the claims. So we've published it. Now the claim has it available. So let's go back to the claim. How are we doing for time, John? We're in good shape? We're in good shape. Okay. So we know it's Florida. And we see the Florida claim, and we got a wonderful little flag here saying, oh, by the way, the URA price change has occurred. Maybe you should go back and revalidate this. It might be a good idea. Okay, so let's go do that. And I'm actually going to validate it a second time here because it's going to make it just a little bit cleaner for us. So you can see right now that it's calculated and said, hey, it's a scroll this a little bit. The URA is valid. What they invoiced and what we're calculating are the same, so you feel good that everybody's on board. The state thinks the same thing you're thinking about, how it should be calculated. But you see these ugly little red things over on the side. You know that usually means there's a concern. How's that? And if you open them up and look and say, okay, even after we change the URA, which might have changed some of these validations, some of the validations would depend on URAs and what the invoiced amount are. But if you drill into these URAs, average units per script test, paid unit trend test, and you also know that the reimbursement test also is dependent on the amount of invoiced units, the amount of scripts involved. And you can look at this and see, oh yeah, number of scripts here in the formula, dispensing fee times number of scripts, et cetera. So if they are making mistakes on either the unit side or the number of scripts side, it can impact this. And you can look and see how it's doing the math and stuff like that. But if you look at this, one of the scripts, or one of the tests says you should be disputing about 70, 80 units. The others are saying, well, you should dispute about 400 units. You like the reasonability tests, but you're sort of a belt and suspenders person like most people. You want to trust but verify. So let's go and say, okay, we know that these are 400. If you click on the other NDC, it's requesting something in the same order. Did I click on the right one? I think I clicked on the wrong one there. Hang on a second. Yeah, this one is about 500. So this one's asking to dispute a few more units on here than the other one. Let's go and do a little analysis on this just outside here, just to feel confident about it before you contact Florida and say, hey, you guys aren't doing the right line edits on this. You're messing up on some of the data you're coming in from this new vendor. So let's go, oops, here, wrong section. So let's go into something that would be in the 5.5 and 5.6 releases, which is Medicaid Advanced Reporting. Okay, so this is the analytics app you heard quite a bit of talk about yesterday. So let's open that up. And what I've done here, and what I'm guessing most people do, is something similar to this. I happen to like bar charts, so I put a bunch of bar charts up here. The whole idea of this particular page for me is I've got a claim with a potential dispute units, and I want to go in here and look and see, do I believe it or not, really? It's sort of eyeball, does this make sense? And so I've put on things here that make sense to me because I know sort of what the validation tests are going to be. So on the left-hand side, I see AWP because I know a lot of the reimbursements are based on AWP, so I've put that up there even though it's supposed to disappear, it doesn't seem to. I've put up AMP and BP up here. You can see AMP's got a little bit of a seasonality to it, but BP pretty constant. That makes sense for this particular product because you know that you've got one contract that's setting BP for you. You look down at the URA has been pretty constant based because the AMP and BP haven't really been changing that much. But it starts getting interesting over on the other side, it's sort of a change anyway, is that the AMP and price lists and stuff like that look pretty constant. The units per script is varying a little bit, but not that much. Rebates and reimbursement over time yeah, there's some variability there. Let me scroll over just a little bit to make that a little bit clearer, because we're losing the legends on this. So just to be clear, upper right-hand quadrant here, we've got invoiced units and invoiced scripts number, which would be, if one went out of whack with the other, you'd think, I've seen a large, maybe no change in the number of invoiced scripts, but a large increase in the number of units. That would be a warning flag that you've got a unit of measure conversion issue, probably. Likewise, in the rebate amount and the reimbursement amount. If they're asking suddenly for a huge rebate and they're not reimbursing that much more, that's also a warning that would say, hey, you might have a unit of measure issue on this. It doesn't look too bad. Why is that? Audience poll. No, I'm not going to run that. Remember, on the program, we've got 4 NDCs. 2 of them didn't have those ugly little red things on them. 2 of them did. This is one of them that doesn't have one of those ugly little red things on it. Let's go to one of the NDCs that does. I'll just pick one of the 2. Oops, I clicked twice, sorry about that. There we go. Okay, the left-hand side, sort of scrolled off the screen here a little bit. Left-hand side looks very similar. The pricing is really the same. It's all, it makes sense. You look over here on the right-hand side, look at that nice big blue bar over on the right-hand side. I don't see the number of scripts really going up there, but I see the number of invoiced units sort of shooting to the ceiling, okay? And likewise down below, you see the invoiced reimbursement amount versus the rebate amount. Boy, we see a big jump up on the rebate amount there. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Matter of fact, it's counterintuitive. Okay, that sort of validates it. But let's take one more thing here, and one thing we can do is export these numbers out to Excel. So I'm just going to export one of them out here to sort of do a back-of-the-envelope calculation. Okay, and so what is it exported out are the invoiced units and scripts on here. I think I've got the wrong, the data doesn't look right. Hang on a second, let me go back. Clicked on the wrong one. Let's try this again. No, this should be right. And so what you can do here, I've got the other NDC, okay. What you can do here is just do a simple average, right? You can see what were the past 7 quarters. Okay, I should be seeing about 1,100, something like that. This is just the back of the envelope, make me feel good sort of a thing. And I know that they're currently invoicing this. So if I just do a simple subtraction, this is just the back of the envelope saying, hey, the average on this, I should be disputing 246 units, right? Just as a third check on this before I go and talk to the state about it. So, the reasonability tests are saying 200, 300, 400. This is saying about 300. The trends on the graph seem to make sense on that. Yeah, I think I'm going to, either call them up or email them or whatever the normal method is of talking to them and say, hey, I think we've got an issue with this particular claim. Let's go back and see if we can rework the numbers on this a little bit. Maybe you need to do some more line edits on it or something like that. Or if they don't feel reasonable about that, I guess it's always time to dispute. Okay? So now we've walked through both parts of the issue. So we just go back to the claim for a second. Go back to the claim. Half of this is fine. We've updated the formula. The formula now matches what the state said. But the other change that's sort of come in and hit you square is that they've changed a provider here. They've changed some of the data coming into you. And you've hopefully caught now and you feel comfortable enough to go back to the state and say, hey, this wasn't right. We need to work on that some more. So that's really where we're at on the demo. Want to just spend a second wrapping up, and then I'd be glad to talk, answer questions and things like that. But the demo went better than it might have, so I'm pleased about that. So, in summary, we all know in Medicaid, just like GP, just like everything else in the government side, change is inevitable. Medicaid, we've been living in a false sense of security for a long time, meaning we haven't had a lot of changes up until the last few years, but it looks like there seems to be more change in progress on that. We do provide some tools to help with that in various different areas, because change can hit us in many different areas, whether it's the formula changes or things like that, whether it's the data coming in. We know, or we've heard anecdotally, that every time that they add a new type of invoicing, a new type of utilization in here, we get dirty data for a while until everybody sort of gets their systems. And we saw that with the J codes. We're seeing that to a certain extent with the managed care utilization, that it isn't quite as clean as the fee-for-service while everybody sort of gets on track. So we offer some, validation and reasonability tests on there to catch the issues up front. Advanced reporting to analyze your process, to also confirm what your reasonability tests and other things are telling you, plus the auditability and compliance that I blew right through because, as I said, Model N's compliance department doesn't really care, but yours probably does quite a bit more. I think we're at the last slide. Questions, comments? Yeah, Kim.
I'm just wondering if anybody heard any updates on the states using electronic rosies and Pequas.
Well, everybody knows that we got the Kansas letter, right?
I mean, I'm on the IT side, so I just haven't had a recent update.
Back
I know
last
that
fall, a year ago, there's this big concern about the Kansas letter that came out. Everybody, asking everybody, could you supply an electronic document if you were requested to do it?
Right.
I've heard that Kansas has sort of backed off on that. Is that everybody else's impression? They asked and then they never followed up. Does anybody know from Kansas? The ones I've heard of Kansas and New York are the ones that had talked about being able to accept it. I don't know of other states that are currently accepting. I sure hope that they get to that point, but okay. That's as far as we know. No, we've heard that. We actually put it into the product so that any of the releases, you can submit an electronic ROSI or PQOS on there. It's available to anybody who wants to, if the states will ever start accepting them. Because we think that's the way to go. Huh?
We've tested your functionality and it works.
Oh, good. Did you find a state that would accept it?
It's laying dormant, but it does, letting people know it does work. We have tested it.
Okay, well, thank you. We built it, with any of these things, part of the problem is getting a critical mass. Enough manufacturers have to be able to provide it, enough states have to be able to accept it, and nobody likes to be the first, chicken or egg or whichever part of this you want to look at to get out there with it. And we're hoping that by us providing part of it, we're not being a hindrance, but helping to promote the idea that Medicaid should get into the 21st century. Other questions? Okay. I'd even entertain a GP question if you wanted to try to throw one at me, or DRM, or FS compliance, or anything else. Okay. Thank you, guys.